How fantastic was that film? It is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage writer-director Megan Griffiths and star John Gallagher Jr. You can change seats every question.
We'll rotate.
Perfect. I think this is such a beautifully stunning film. I'm a huge fan of all of your work already, and I'm curious, when you're starting to map out your next project, do you kind of start by thinking about the characters or the larger story as a whole?
I tend to go theme first, actually. This was a film I wanted to make because I wanted to talk about youth and violence and the effects of war on our young people and the effects of not just war, but just a culture that celebrates violence on the people who are coming of age in that culture, and how that affects how they solve their own problems and the methods they use. So I wanted to talk about that. And then I decided I wanted to make it about a young girl because I hadn't seen that story before. I'd seen some sort of violent boy stories and some stories of soldiers, but I hadn't seen it done from the perspective of a young woman. So that's why Sadie kind of came into being, and then everybody else sort of rose organically around her.
It's perfect because the film is centered in that way. And for you, John, when you were first reading the script, what was the moment that it grabbed you and you went, I really need to be part of this project?
Almost instantly. I think probably even before my character really showed up. I knew Megan's
Although your character
work.
was on page one.
Wasn't page one, but it's not anymore. It used to begin with my guy rolling into town, and I said, I'll do it. Any movie that begins with me driving up in my vintage car. And then you cut it, Megan. Why did you cut it?
So painful. I'm so
No.
sad that's not in there. Look for it on our DVD.
Exactly, the deleted scenes. No, I'm just kidding. I think you did the right thing. I think it would confuse people to be like, what's this Sadie movie with this guy driving up, and who's he? But pretty instantly, because I loved Megan's work. I had seen her films before and had met her at some film festivals. And I had been really dying to work with Melanie. I was a huge fan of hers for years and years. And so it was kind of like a dream come true just getting it sent my way. And when I started reading it, I didn't put it down, and I really fell in love with the characters. And there was just so much love and sadness and sympathy on the page overall for the whole story. And I was also really excited and really flattered because I feel like I don't often get asked to play, I guess, more complicated characters, and I was really eager to, play somebody that was flawed and nuanced, and that meant a lot to me that you thought of me for that part. So yeah, we Skyped, and I was like, I want to do it, and then off we went.
And I should say that I think it's really interesting to cast someone who is themselves very likable in a role that is kind of on the edge of likable, just because I think it makes it a lot more complicated to watch when you can't necessarily write off any of the characters completely. There's something about them that's interesting to you, and there's something human about them that you want. And so I really like the idea. Like, John is such a great actor, and I knew that he was capable of doing all the things that this character needed to do, but I also liked his presence and his persona on screen. I felt like from what I had seen, I just really liked the merging of that with this kind of rough dude.
What were some of the conversations that the two of you had when you first met and you were talking about the project? Like, what's important to you as an actor to ask directors about when you're coming onto a project?
Well, Megan provided some really great backstory, really detailed, and you don't always get that. Often you'll have to kind of internalize that and make it up for yourself. But there was a lot that you gave me with that, and that was really helpful because I had kind of an idea of where this person had come from, because he kind of comes into the, he's the outlier, so he comes into the story without much of a background. That was really great, and that was really useful, but we didn't do a ton of rehearsing or anything. I showed up in Seattle and we hung out a few times. The karaoke was very vital, I felt.
It was a big part of our process.
We went out and did karaoke the first night. I think maybe.
Welcome to Seattle. That's our welcome party. Generally.
Did you guys do any duets together?
No, not yet. Not yet.
But I
Maybe
still,
tonight.
but you're amazing at karaoke. Megan's amazing at karaoke.
I mean,
yeah.
he's like an actual singer, so. I actually did a Q&A karaoke once with Lou Diamond Phillips, so maybe I'll do that with you tomorrow.
Perfect. Now we know next time we have you both here. One of the things that I love that you explore with the character of Cyrus, so with such delicacy, is the opioid addiction. And how did you decide how you were going to approach that? Because it's an intimate character portrayal, but touching on a much larger theme.
Yeah, it's interesting how prevalent that story has gotten over the time. I wrote this script in 2009, and I don't remember it being the story then that it is now. I'm sure it was a problem then, but I wanted the character to have like a vulnerability and something that made his life a little less in his control, and so that was the reason for it in the first place. And then I just wanted to do justice to people who were struggling with that and make sure we weren't painting it as too one note and just kind of getting into the nuances of someone who's dealing with pain and taking painkillers. There is a real challenging struggle there, because it's like you're sort of forced to do this thing that's very bad for you, and then it becomes an addiction, and the companies who are making them are pushing them on people who probably shouldn't be taking them. It's just like a really complicated issue, and it isn't the main issue behind the movie, but it was something we wanted to make sure to do our research on and be genuine with.
And how about for you, John, with your performance and figuring out, because we, the audience, don't really know it's there at the beginning, but obviously I'm sure that you were crafting it into your character.
Yeah, certainly. I think that the kind of the whole crux of that guy is that he's in this tremendous pain all the time and is so does not know how to get out of it, and that kind of colored the whole performance for me. Was just the notion of keeping it in mind in every scene, that even when it seems like he's having a good day, that like he's probably barely hanging on and able to stay present, and that tied into this idea of someone who does act out and doesn't always do what's best for him, and that it became that idea that maybe this kind of sadness that he might be able to do the right thing if he wasn't hurting so bad, which ultimately was just so heartbreaking to me, that the pain kind of has maybe made his character suffer and his integrity suffer as a result. But I just loved that it was, it didn't feel manipulative. It didn't feel like it was like an issue that was being, exploited or used for a plot point. It really just felt very real and not heavy-handed. And I had hurt my back once, and it was awful. And so I drew from that. And I remember I bulged a disc once coughing, because I had a really bad cold, and my friend told a joke, and I started laughing, and then I had a coughing fit, and the next thing I knew, I was on the floor. And I tried a bunch of different things before finally going and doing like a chiropractic thing. I'm sure this is really what everybody wants to hear tonight.
You've made me afraid of ever coughing again.
But for like a week or two, I was like out, and that it's unbelievable what that kind of pain can do, and the idea that someone is still that you have to try to wake up and have a life in the face of that. And so I really, for a variety of reasons, it really made me feel for this guy.
I feel like we'd be remiss not to talk about the actress Sophia, who plays Sadie, and I know she was 13 when you guys filmed, and then you were just saying that the boy who plays Francis was only 9 when you guys shot this. Mm-hmm. How does, for both of you, acting and directing, how does that change the language that you have on set when you're building out those scenes with them?
I mean, Sophia, who plays Sadie, is kind of a preternaturally gifted young woman, and also just very together and very intelligent and very prepared every day. And I never really felt like I was working with a kid when I was working with her. I don't know if you felt that way too.
No, I felt the same way.
She just
so mature.
Yeah, it was like talking to any of the actors on set. She's so mature, and she just is so incredibly grounded in her character that I didn't have to like, go out of my way to, trick her into a performance, like she was just there doing it. And so she was sort of a special case. Keith was 9, so he was definitely a little bit more, all over, bouncing off the walls, and needed a lot of attention on set, which was fun for me because I adore that child so much. But it was, he was more like, what are we doing? What are my lines? What's this movie about? And like, and then we'd go through that, and, his mom would go through each scene with him every day. But yeah, so he was different, and they had really different energies. So it was kind of a challenge on set balancing in the scenes with the two of them. But I think I loved how they played off each other, and her intensity with his just like sort of wide-eyed adorableness. Like I thought he was really good for all those scenes. Sort of poked holes in her, like complete self-seriousness.
Could you talk a little bit about the way that you kind of tease out Sadie's character in that way, where just as the film goes on, we just see this darker and darker and darker side of her, and the way that you created that arc?
Yeah, I wanted her to be, I think that everything that she does for me feels very organic to who she is as a character, and the way her logical brain works. She's a very intelligent girl. She doesn't think in shades of gray, though. She thinks in black and white, and she thinks like, I'm going to make this decision to solve this problem, and she doesn't really think about how it affects other people. But she also goes through variations of that decision-making process where she doesn't get any sort of pushback or consequence. So it escalates and escalates over the course of the movie to the point where, she goes way too far at the end, whether it be intentional or not. It's something that, her brain was like, this is how I will finally solve this problem. And I think it was important to just see it in small ways growing over the course of the movie. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, I have hope for her at the end, because I feel like she's sort of, running, and then eventually kind of hits a wall with it and sees that there is in fact consequences to these kind of actions. So for me, that I feel a little hope for her, even though she's just done this terrible thing.
A few of those things. And then what about the scene where she comes into Cyrus's trailer park? Because I think that was so delicately handled and could have felt a little bit exploitative, but it felt like it was handled in a very nuanced way. So for both of you, from the directing standpoint, like making that feel like a safe environment, and then obviously for you, John, acting against her in that scene.
In general, I always want to have a really safe environment on set, because it's nice of me, but it's also very selfish, because I think performances are better when actors feel like they can be vulnerable and take risks. And so I want to have that environment every day on set, but especially in a scene like that. We talked a lot about it beforehand. The three of me and John and Sophia and her mother Irene were in the RV together for maybe like 45 minutes even before we started shooting it, just kind of talking through it and making sure everybody felt good. And it was intense, but I felt like everybody came at it so professionally.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it really was. Everybody. We knew that it was a kind of intense and tough thing that we had to do. And one thing that I kind of just offered up right off the jump was that I told Sophia and her mother that, when we were doing her coverage, I was never going to look directly at her. So I looked at an angle and I gave her something to work off of, but I just didn't want her to be worried about my eyes. And I also felt that it wasn't really my place to, something, to witness. I wanted her to feel as comfortable as possible in an uncomfortable situation. And I think that helped, because I saw her shoulders like relax immediately after that. I was like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna be over there. I'm gonna give you the lines. We're gonna do the scene as many times as we need to, but I'm not gonna see anything, so don't worry about that." But it was intense. It's obviously a very intense scene, but she just was so brave about it. That I was totally inspired. The whole time working with her, I was really inspired. Working with younger actors is amazing, because there is a kind of courage that they have that I'm envious of. And I'm like, how can I get some of that? Brave like that.
Yeah, and I remember Sophia was also, she was kind of struggling on that. I mean, we shot that scene 2 days before we were supposed to, too, because we just had to shift our schedule. So it was sort of one of those things where we didn't really know we were coming into work that day to do that scene. So I think that actually maybe helped us a little bit in terms of taking a lot of the, lead up pressure off of it. But when we were doing it, Sophia was kind of frustrated because she wasn't getting to the place that she wanted to get to emotionally. And we did her coverage, I don't know how many times, but there was I knew she was frustrated because every time she'd come out and call cut and kind of reset for everything, she'd be like, God, am I getting, is it what you want? And I felt happy after a certain number of takes, and then she really wanted another one. And she went in to do it, and then she came out and she was frustrated, and I was like, just go back in and do it again. It's her dress was the wrong way on, because it had to be inside out or whatever. But she went back in and she got all this emotion out that she'd been holding on to, just because it came out as frustrated tears. And I didn't end up using much of that take at all, actually, but she felt so much better. I think she would have felt like she didn't do what she wanted to do if she hadn't gotten to get it to that place.
That's amazing. And how about the relationship between Ray and Cyrus? Because it's great the way that you play this out in this very intimate way. There's no flashy romance between them, even though there is that immediate chemistry and connection, and just how you structured and built that out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they had really good chemistry, and they knew each other. You guys knew each other a little bit, right?
Yeah, I met Melanie a few times. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I didn't know her very well.
Huge amount of mutual respect, and but yeah, when we started shooting, I was happy to see that I felt like there was a really believable chemistry between the two of them. And then we shot the scene of them in the bar, and then we were editing that, and there was I did early cuts. I was like, okay, it's reading, it's fine, it's enough. And then I ended up just kind of pushing it a little farther, just to really establish the fact that that they were really seeing something in each other. And then when they kiss at the end, which was on day one of our shoot,
the first thing Melanie and I shot was walking her home and kissing her. That was the first thing I did.
Right,
it's
into
like,
the mix.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
oh my
sorry.
God.
But there's a really, I mean, I love that scene, but there's this beautiful moment where they're kissing, and in Melanie's close up, she looks like she's there's all this guilt and confusion, and then John kisses her again, and then she's just like, nope, I want to go for it. It's it's just this decision that she makes that I think is I just love those kind of small things.
And for both of you, you've worked on a lot of independent film sets, but also you've directed a bunch of television, and John, you've done network and network television, bigger budget films, theater. One of the things I always find really interesting, though, about independent films is there are those time constraints. But was there any point in this project particularly where that led to some sort of burst of creativity that might not have existed otherwise?
The scene where Cyrus is trying to drive Ray home after the bar scene, there's this beautiful shot. I think it's a beautiful shot in the hallway. It's a 2-shot, and we were totally forced into doing that because it was pouring rain outside, and we couldn't have done the sort of the quiet scene that we wanted to do between the two of them outside. So we sort of did it, and we did it as a oneer. We didn't have any coverage for it. So for me, that was it's one of my favorite shots in the movie, and I was really happy that it came out that way, because it was, for a while, looked like we might not even be able to shoot it at all.
I just like the kind of energy of I like not having a ton. I almost like having less time to make something. I feel like it makes things really immediate, and you have to kind of just get to the core of whatever you're after. So I like doing low budget films that that you have to do kind of quick, because it feels like there's an immediacy. Like, we have to do this. I like that.
Yeah.
Are there any aspects of your craft as an actor that you approach differently when you're doing film versus theater versus television, and how do those kind of feed into each other organically as well?
I mean, I try to kind of go into everything with a blank slate. I don't have a specific set of tools or something that I say I'm going to do this process and this works every time. I like to just go and see. My favorite thing to do is go and see what kind of project, whether it's a play or a film or TV, what is the director going after. And that's honestly what I look to and where I try to build everything from is what story does a filmmaker want to make, and how do I help make that a reality. That for me, that's always just the kind of most surefire way to get plugged in is to go from that, because then that just kind of becomes a simple relationship. And I love filmmakers. You know, I really do. I couldn't do it, and I'm in awe of them every time. And so I look to the boss really to kind of lead the way. Yeah.
And Megan, you seem to be part of an incredibly tight-knit community of filmmakers and producers in Seattle, and a lot of you all work together on each other's projects. You've been a producer on some of their films. How do you feel like that's helped you grow as a director, and then also having been a producer on other projects where you get the opportunity to see someone directing? Because when you're making your own films, there's one director on set.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I was an assistant director too for 5 years, and that put me on a lot of sets with people who I was, doing it on smaller budget stuff. So a lot of the people were first-time directors. So I got to witness a lot of first-time directors in action and learn from their successes and failures, and apply them to myself. But that role is, producer as well. But I just did it for so many more times as an assistant director that I think about that, because it's like I got such access to so many different kinds of conversations, like, right there when the actors or the directors are talking to the actors, and right there when the director's talking to his cinematographer, and the cinematographer talking to the gaffer, and all these things. It's like I just felt like I understood everybody's job, and I got this comfort on set where I didn't feel like a lot of first-time directors will walk on set and be like, I don't know what everybody's doing, and I don't know why this is taking this long, and it gets in their head and it freaks them out, and there's like this baseline of stress, and there's always going to be some stress because it's never just like endless amounts of time, but I felt like it was really good for me to spend all that time on other people's sets, because then I came onto my own set feeling really comfortable, and like I knew everybody's role, and like I knew the information that they needed from me in order to do their job efficiently and well, and that's all sort of helpful to me in terms of time, so that was really useful. And then the producing stuff, there's just a lot of, that's just such a thankless job that I really am so appreciative of my producers. I think there can be an antagonistic relationship sometimes when you're getting told no about things that you want or whatever, but I feel like I've been able to develop relationships with my producers where I can be included in the process of compromise, where I'm not having compromises forced on me. I'm, we're trusting each other enough that they're saying like, hey, we're over here, like, is there something, this is our suggestion of what we should cut in order to get this back on budget, but like, is there something that you have in your back pocket that you're willing to do? And on SADIE, we were supposed to shoot at that bar for 2 days. In the original schedule, we had a 20-day schedule. And then my cinematographer, TJ, and I were scouting, and we're like, we could probably do this in like one long day and save a whole day. And so we went back to the producers, and we were like, because everybody was straining at the budget. It was so, it was tough. And so I said, listen, we think we can do this in one 14-hour day if people are okay with like, us, us using that overtime, but then, and just lose a complete day in the schedule. And everyone was just like, really? And it just like released this tension in the room that was so it was nice to be able to know how far a decision like that could go, as opposed to being like so stubborn about needing, I would have had 2 very leisurely days in that bar. Although maybe we would have been able to shoot that one scene outside, but I like it where we shot it, so it's good.
I do too.
You could have done karaoke at the bar for the whole second day. How about, because this film was supported by Sundance and IFP, so how's some of your experience with kind of labs and initiatives like that been in getting films made?
Well, we took this to, Sundance Producing Lab and IFP, No Borders, and Rotterdam Co-Production Market. So it went around, and this was all in 2011. So it was definitely a part of its process. I don't know that I could point to anything that happened in any of those scenarios that led to the ultimate movie that got made. But for me, I felt like it was just more of a career sort of sustaining and building that happened there. Just because this movie was really, really hard to get made. We spent 9 years trying to get it made, and we got a lot of people saying like, "You're making a movie about kids, but for adults, and who's gonna watch it? And you're making a movie about a young, violent girl, and can it be a boy?" And like all these kind of questions that you get faced with, and you're just like, you just got to stick to your guns and be like really sure that you want to make this movie. And eventually it came together, and I'm really happy. It was I felt like it was the movie I wanted to make, but it was a long road, and so it's hard to say exactly what things that happened along that whole period actually got it there.
For you, Megan, as a director, and for you, John, as an actor, what are some of the aspects of your career and your craft that you always imagined would get easier with time, but are still the hardest parts of your job?
Fundraising. It's so hard to get anything financed. It's like, it's hard. I think my career has also spanned in this converse way the decline of budgets in this industry. So it's like, as I've gotten more experienced, budgets have just gotten lower. And so I'm just like flatlined. But it's never an easy thing to get a film made. So it's always I always feel like it's sort of a miracle when I'm standing on set saying action.
Yeah, traveling. Traveling's hard. No, I think it's why I was so excited to take this part is because it was something. It was a kind of role that I don't get asked to do a lot, and I'd say that it's the kind of imagination factor of casting directors and directors that I still find is really hard. I still very often get, "Oh, you're not this type of guy. You're definitely this type of person over here," and that's always frustrating because I'd like to think maybe I'm delusional that there's a bunch of different things and a bunch of different people that any actor could do or play if just given the chance. And running into that, still after doing this for a while, that can be can be a bummer from time to time. And that's why it means so much to me, Megan, that you offered me this part, because this is the kind of thing that normally I feel like I have to chase down and try to convince somebody that I could take a shot at it. But yeah, that happens sometimes.
When you were both starting out in your careers and you were at that point where you're doing the hustle, where it's, okay, I'm directing a film, I'm acting in this, but you still had to take on a bunch of other jobs just to support yourself financially, how did you find ways to feed yourself creatively just to kind of get that passion out there still?
I always have. I have always had a project brewing at any given time. So, like when I moved to Seattle out of film school, and when I first was there, I was working at a film lab, and I was writing a script, and then I made that in 2002. Yeah, and then I started writing this movie, The Off Hours, which took me a long time to get made too. And so that was my sort of background project, and then SADIE was my background project for a long time. I always had something happening that I could go back to and try to get it made, and so that always kept me, always felt like I had my eyes on sort of a distant part of the horizon.
I play music as well, and that has been really therapeutic over the years because that's something that I don't need permission to do. So much of acting is opportunity and being given it, being allowed, being asked or not asked, and waiting around for that to happen. As much as I'd love to cast myself in things, I just can't. But like writing music is something that at any time of day I can. Nobody will hear it possibly, but I can at least sit down and do it. And that's been like a source of nourishment over the years.
Amazing. Well, the film is coming out in cinemas, and so please tell all of your friends, family, post on social media about it, because independent films really need that support. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
It's
It comes
beautiful.
out tomorrow in New York. So tell everyone you know tonight or tomorrow. SADIEFilm.com for all info. Yep. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.